Well, as my dear departed Uncle Annie once said, you have to be smarter than the machine. And this machine just about got the best of me here a minute ago. We're going to start over and try again. That's what we do. Yesterday we talked about yogiisms, and I've got Vickyisms, and one of them is, if you miss it the first time, you get back up and run over it again. That's what I do with these videos a lot, is back up and run over them again. Thank God for editing. This cup, by the way, was a gift from my son one year for my birthday. It's a Mr. Coffee mug, and it's got a thing that goes in the top, like a little, kind of like one of those lids you can drink through, so that you don't spill coffee all over yourself when you're driving down the road or whatever. September 23rd, this day in history. We're going to go all the way back to 63 BC, when Augustus, the first Roman emperor, was born. Born Gaius Octavius Thurinus, and if I've pronounced that incorrectly, I know someone will correct me. His maternal great-uncle was Julius Caesar. When Julius Caesar was assassinated in 44 BC, Octavius was named in Caesar's will as his adopted son and heir. It took a while for the dust to settle after Caesar's death, but eventually Augustus landed in charge as emperor. He dramatically enlarged the empire and accomplished many remarkable things, such as developing networks of roads, establishing a courier system and a standing army. He created official police and fire protection for Rome, rebuilt much of the city during his reign, and more. And he lived to the ripe old age of 75. I didn't live back then, but it sounds to me like he did a pretty good job as emperor. I'm sure some might disagree, but somebody always does. In 1561, Philip II of Spain gave orders to halt colonizing efforts in Florida. Now, I saw this headline and I thought, well, yeah, but why? I mean, everybody was all about expanding. Why did he tell them to stop? And it was hard to find an exact answer to this specific question, but the best I could come up with was that he had inherited quite a mess of a kingdom when his father passed away, with huge debts to lots of different people. And even though he was a good-looking guy, dressed well, and made a good presentation, people were easy to like him, it seems like maybe he wasn't really that good of a manager. A quote says, "Aside from reducing state revenues for overseas expeditions, the domestic policies of Philip II further burdened the Spanish kingdoms." So it sounds like his orders to halt colonization efforts in Florida was a money-saving thing. It might be that that's a way across the ocean. He couldn't see any benefit from it right away, and it was expensive, so he told him to cut it out. Looks like this order to halt colonizing efforts in Florida was one way to stop spending money he didn't have. In 1577, William of Orange made a triumphant entry into Brussels, Belgium. In 1667, slaves in Virginia were banned from obtaining their freedom by converting to Christianity. Virginia lawmakers said baptism would not bring freedom to blacks. The statute was passed because some slaves had used their status as Christians in the 1640s and 1650s to argue for their freedom, or freedom for their children. Legislators did encourage slave owners to Christianize their enslaved men, women, and children, but that wasn't enough to let them go free. In 1739, Austrians signed the Treaty of Belgrade after having lost the city to the Turks. In 1806, the Lewis and Clark expedition arrived back in St. Louis in just over 3 years after its departure. In 1846, German astronomer Johann Gottfried Galle discovered the planet Neptune at the Berlin Observatory. Neptune, generally the eighth planet from the Sun, was postulated by the French astronomer Leverrier, who calculated the approximate location of the planet by studying gravity-induced disturbances in the motions of Uranus. I find it impressive that they could recognize such things back then with the equipment they had. He calculated the approximate location of the planet by studying gravity-induced disturbances in the motions of Uranus. On September 23, 1846, Leverrier informed Gall of his findings, and the same night, Gall and his assistant Heinrich Louis Darret identified Neptune at their observatory in Berlin. Noting its movement relative to the background stars over 24 hours confirmed that it was a planet. The blue gas giant, which has a diameter 4 times that of Earth, was named for the Roman god of the sea. It has 8 known moons, of which Triton is the largest, and a ring system containing 3 bright and 2 dim rings. It completes an orbit of the Sun once every 165 years. In 1989, the U.S. planetary spacecraft Voyager 2 was the first human spacecraft to visit Neptune. I always enjoyed caricatures of Neptune with those 3 little rings around his head. In 1875, Billy the Kid was arrested for the first time after stealing a basket of laundry. He later broke out of jail and roamed the American West, eventually earning a reputation as an outlaw and a murderer and a rap sheet that allegedly included 21 murders. The exact details of Billy the Kid's birth are unknown other than his name, William Henry McCarty. He was probably born sometime between 1859 and 1861 in Indiana or New York. That's a pretty big neighborhood. As a child, he had no relationship with his father and moved around with his family, living in Indiana, Kansas, Colorado, and Silver City, New Mexico. His mother died in 1874, and Billy the Kid, who went by a variety of names throughout his life, including Kid Antrim and William Bonney, turned to crime soon afterward. In 1908, a controversial call gives the Cubs the pennant. On September 23, 1908, a game between the New York Giants and the Chicago Cubs ends in a 1-1 tie after a controversial call at second base. The official rules that Giants first baseman Fred Merkle was out because he failed to touch second base, a call that has been disputed ever since. In 1911, the second International Aviation Meet opened in New York. In 1912, Mack Sennett's first Keystone Cop film debuted, Cohen Collects a Debt. On this day in 1933, a party of American geologists landed at the Persian Gulf port of Jubail in Saudi Arabia and began its journey into the desert. That July, with the discovery of a massive oil field at Ghawar, Saudi King Abdul Aziz had granted the Standard Oil Company of California a concession to explore and search for and drill and extract and manufacture and transport petroleum and kindred bituminous matter in the country's vast eastern province. In turn, Standard Oil immediately dispatched the team of scientists to locate the most profitable spot for the company to begin its drilling. 1933. In 1945, the first American died in Vietnam during the fall of Saigon to French forces. In 1949, in a surprisingly low-key but carefully worded statement, President Harry S. Truman informed the American people that the Soviets had exploded a nuclear bomb. The Soviet accomplishment, years ahead of what was thought possible by most U.S. officials, caused a panic in the American government. Most American officials, even the majority of scientists in the United States, believed that it would be many years before the Soviets could develop an atomic bomb of their own, and by that time the United States would have achieved a vast numeric superiority. That'd mean we'd have a lot more of them. On September 3, 1949, however, U.S. scientists recorded seismic activity from inside the Soviet Union that was unmistakably the result of an underground nuclear test. Truman, informed of this development, at first refused to believe it. He ordered his scientific and military advisors to check their data. Once they confirmed the results, however, Truman had to face the fact that America's nuclear monopoly was gone. He also had to face the task of informing the American people, for the news was sure to leak. On September 23rd, he issued a brief statement to the media saying, "We have evidence within recent weeks an atomic explosion occurred in the USSR." In 1954, East German police arrested 400 citizens as U.S. spies. In 1973, Juan Perón was re-elected president of Argentina after having been overthrown in 1955. And in 2002, the first public version of Mozilla Firefox browser was released. Originally called Phoenix 0.1, the name was changed due to trademark issues with Phoenix Technologies. And that's it for today, kids. Thank you so much for watching. As always, I'll have links to my research materials in the description below. Please give it a thumbs up if you enjoyed this video. Consider subscribing if you haven't already. And feel free to share this if you found any part of it interesting. There's also a postal address in case you want to send me a mug. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time. Come on now, you can do it. You can do it. I know you can do it. Good girl. Good girl. September 13th. This is not the 13th. As long as I can see that green light, I'm still in business. We're good. We're good. Okay. The blue not glass. Oop, we're going to go to another page again. Don't make me squeak that pig again.